Right now I'm shooting on the Panasonic S5. It's a new full frame camera that's geared towards creators. So in this video, we're gonna dive into what makes this camera unique and whether this is a camera that you should get. All right guys, let's get into it. So I'm gonna be shooting this entire video using the Panasonic S5. So all of the footage that you see, all the A-roll is gonna be from this camera, and also all the B-roll, of course, as well. So before we get into my thoughts around this camera, let's look at some of the footage that I've been able to get while I'm out shooting with it. Now there's a ton of really good aspects around this camera, and there are also some things that are a little bit frustrating. And I've had this camera for about a month now, and I've used it on every production that I've been working on. So whether here on my channel, all of the videos that you've seen recently, all of the A-roll and a lot of the B-roll that you're seeing, it's all shot with the Panasonic S5. And then on the other side of things in my client work, I've brought this along on every shoot, whether it's been shooting on a gimbal, getting like B-roll, some behind the scenes, and also I've been using it for a lot of my A-roll, a lot of the interview stuff that I've been shooting. And one of the cool things about this camera is that if you are a Panasonic user and you already use things like the hot shoe microphone attachment, it works seamlessly with this. So just like the other full frame cameras in Panasonic's lineup, this is a new addition with some key features that's really geared towards creators. So one of the key things that really stands out on this camera is now you have a big flip out screen. So it's a small body, it's smaller than the GH5, but you have a big flip out screen and has a price tag of $2,000. So it's much cheaper than a lot of the other full frame options out there, and it's got a lot of power packed into this camera. So I've got a lot of different aspects that I want to talk about in this video, and we're just gonna go through them and I'll talk about my experience working with it in the real world. Not like doing some crazy scientific tests here, but I really wanted to use this camera in a lot of scenarios where I actually will be using this camera to give you my opinion on whether this is a good camera or not. Let's first dig into what this camera offers. So the S5 is a 24 megapixel hybrid camera, so it's good for both stills and video. You can shoot 4K up to 60 frames a second, and you can shoot in slow-mo up to 180 frames per second. So it kind of feels like a big brother of the GH5. However, there are a few things you have to keep into consideration when you're going from something like a Micro Four Thirds to the full frame S5. Now with the 4K 60, it's cropped. And for me, this is one of those pain points where I really miss having the GH5. You can go from 24 or 30 to 60 and not have to deal with a crop. Now, if you're shooting 1080 120, you get full frame and you still get autofocus when you're shooting in slow motion 120 frames per second. However, there is no 120p mode where it records audio at the same time as video. So basically you're limited to 4K 60 to be the highest frame rate that you can shoot in, where you're still getting audio along with the video. Now it has dual card slots. However, when it comes to the HDMI, it now uses a micro HDMI instead of a full HDMI. I would have appreciated having a full HDMI out, especially because coming from the GH5, that's something that is just integrated nicely in with that system. Now, even though the camera is smaller, it has a good grip. So if you're hand holding and walking around, yesterday I was out in the desert shooting in 103-degree temperatures, and the camera just felt great in my hand walking around with it shooting all day. Now for me, I'm glad they added a USB-C on the side and you can charge while you're recording. So right now I have the camera plugged in using a USB-C, so it's constantly providing power. So instead of having to have like a dummy battery in the battery grip, you can just use your USB-C and charge while you're actually recording. Now also, Panasonic has developed a new battery for this camera, and it's gonna last longer than some of the other batteries in the lineup. Now for me, this camera feels great in my hands. Like I said, it's a little bit smaller than the GH5 and it's full frame. So It has a nice size to the body where it's not super bulky like the S1H, and it has everything that you would want from a camera of this size, especially for creators. With the flip out screen, the big red button on the top, access to all your controls at your fingertip, it just feels good when you're working with it, and I do like the way that this one is designed. Now let's talk about overheating. So yesterday I was out in the desert in 103 degrees and I had this camera out shooting the entire day. The battery didn't die, and on top of it, it never overheated. Like, the camera was hot to the touch when we would be working with it. I couldn't hold on to it at certain points because I'd be having the S5 in the middle of direct sunlight on a tripod, filming us as we were exploring a slot canyon. Now guys, if you want to see the full video from this experience, I shot the entire video on the Panasonic S5, and my goal with this was to shoot in a run and gun styles to really get a feel for how this camera performs for stabilization, autofocus, color, changing lights. We're in a canyon where it was very dark and very bright. So it was a good way to test a bunch of different features on this camera and really see if this camera is good for creators and working in this run and gun style. But when it comes to overheating, I've had no issues with this camera overheating at all. And I've definitely pushed it in different hot environments, shooting at 4K 60, and nothing has really caused this camera to overheat even when it does get super hot. And that's one thing about Panasonic. The build quality of the camera bodies works well in extreme environments. So whether it is pouring down rain or it is out in the sun, I've never had issues with my GH5, and I haven't had any issues with this S5 yet. So in a lot of ways, I've found that Panasonic makes great cameras for creators who are out there shooting in varying type of environmental conditions. So I want to talk about stabilization because Panasonic has decent stabilization. It's good. As long as you stay away from super wide lenses, you can get good stabilization. So in this setting, I have a 16, which is equivalent to a 24 if you were to put it into full frame. And you'll notice that, yeah, you'll get some warpy effects if you're moving the camera around and in the corners, but it's not terrible in the grand scheme of warpy cameras. There's some much worse warpiness on other cameras out there. But overall, I've always been super happy with Panasonic's stabilization. And if you've used the GH5, if you've used some of Panasonic's other cameras, then you'll be happy with this one because the stabilization is also very good on this camera. Whether you're in full frame or APS-C, it's never gonna be perfect. You always get some warpy stuff with wide lenses. Zoomed in lenses, you're not gonna be so much, but you also gotta remember that stabilization is not a complete replacement for things like gimbals and whatnot. But what's good about Panasonic stabilization is that it will keep your shot smooth and you're not gonna get like crazy micro jitters or anything like that. All right, so we gotta talk about the elephant in the room, which is autofocus, because Panasonic has never been known to have the best autofocus. However, with this camera, they have improved it, and I'm told from Panasonic that this is the fastest autofocus that Panasonic has created. And one of the standout features with the autofocus is now, instead of just having face, eye, and body detect, it also has head. So the autofocus system is gonna hunt for your eye, your head, your face, and your entire body to be able to find the best focus point. But as you've been seeing throughout this video, I have been shooting completely on auto, and most of what I've shot on this camera has been on auto, and I've been able to trust it in a lot of situations. But when I'm using something like a gimbal and I'm like pushing in and out from some different scenes, it really takes a while to grab onto the subject. Sometimes it snaps on, and then sometimes it just sits there and it waits, and then finally it grabs the focus. So in a setting where you have like someone sitting here, you're doing a talking head interview, yeah, the autofocus works. And once in a while I've noticed that it will bounce off the subject, but very rarely in comparison to other Panasonic cameras that I've worked with. However, if you're like moving fast in and out of a subject, it does take a second for it to register that subject, even in a situation where there is enough light to be able to, see the subject. And you can see here, I have the autofocus settings on the fastest I could put them just to see if I could get it to snap quickly. And when I go out of frame, we'll have it catch the background and back in. And there we're now in focus. It does put a limitation on this camera where if you are using like gimbal work where you're flying in and out and moving all around, it's gonna take a while for it to snap on the subject. You're not gonna be able to like grab onto the subject all the time. But in a lot of situations where you are stationary or you're maintaining the distance, you can rely on the autofocus to grab the subject and then be able to hold that. So definitely an improvement, but something to consider if you want to get this camera. All right, so we need to talk about lenses. So in front of me, I have a bunch of Sigma glass. These are full frame lenses, 85, 50, 35, and these are the little APS-C baby lenses, the 30, the 56, and the 16. Now, Panasonic doesn't have a massive lineup for full frame lenses at the moment. I'm shooting on the 20 to 60, which is a great all-around lens, but it's not a consistent lens. So for my client work, I really don't like shooting on that because if I have to zoom in and out, I have to mess around with all the settings to change my exposure. And also, it's not a super fast lens, so you're not gonna get that super shallow depth of field that you wanna get when you're using full frame. However, Panasonic does have some other lenses. You have the 24 to 70, you have the 16 to 35, the 70 to 200, and the 50. You kind of have like the basic lenses that you need for a system, but all good lenses, but that's all you really have to work with this camera. And there's a lot of lenses missing in their lineup. I would love to see a set of primes from Panasonic so I don't have to be using these Sigma lenses. These are great, but they're massive. I love the image quality I'm getting out of the Sigma lenses, but just working with this 85, it's huge. I would love to see versions of these lenses that were like a 1.8 and much smaller. And then I would also love to see something like a 16 to 35 2.8 or some other variances and some other options for lenses. The issue is the L mount has very expensive glass, and that is something to consider when you're looking at getting a Panasonic full frame camera. These three are great for working in APS-C, but these are pretty much the only lenses that you have in APS-C that will work with this camera for the L mount. So one of the best things about this camera is the color. You have a ton of options with the picture profiles, but everything that I've worked with in this camera, I've been super pleased with the colors that I'm getting out of it. Now for me, I normally use the natural profile, and that's what I'm shooting on right now. And one of the things they've added with this camera is a flat profile. So this is now the flat profile, and if you want some room for color grading, this is a great option. Now this camera also comes with V-Log in it. It's not something you have to purchase additional. So if you do want the 14 plus stops of dynamic range, then you can use the V-Log and get the most out of this camera. But just having, this natural or the flat, which is on right now, I've been able to get some really good looking footage and, have a little room to tweak, but not have to push it super far. So let's talk about some of the features that really stand out in my eyes for this camera. And one of those is just the red box around the screen. So while you're recording, instead of just doing like a flashing icon of a red dot and like a count up or anything like that, it puts a red box entirely around the screen. And it might know it's not like a huge thing, but when you're shooting, you find that that red box really indicates like, oh yeah, I am recording, and you can see it from a distance. It just catches your eye much easier. You never have to really look for the little red icon. Now, another small thing, mic jack on this camera is not in front of the screen. So I can twist my screen back and forth. I'm not gonna hit the mic jack, and I don't have to like pivot the screen out to be able to go from like this vlog mode to shooting this way. I can flip the screen without hitting anything. On the top of your camera, you're gonna have an S and Q button, which is slow and quick. So instead of having to go into the menus to be able to turn on your slow motion for like 120 or 180, you can just do it from the top of your camera and flip it over to S and Q mode. And one other thing that really stands out is that when you're shooting vertical for social media, when you put the camera sideways like this and you hit record, the camera can automatically detect that your camera's vertical. So when you play back the clip on your computer, it's gonna play back vertical and you don't have to do any rotation in your editing software. It's a small thing, but for people that do vertical videos, it's gonna be something that's super helpful. So one thing that's coming with the Panasonic S5, it's not available yet, but this camera will be able to shoot 5.2K RAW. Now, right now, you can actually shoot in 5K. You have to use the photo mode, but it really does actually shoot in a video way. So when you put it into photo mode and record your photo series, you can essentially get the full sensor readout at 5K, and you can record in 15-minute chunks. Now, I've been shooting with this and I've shot 15 minutes and then re-rolled 15 minutes. And again, no issues with overheating or anything like that. It seems to just roll and it pumps out a 5K file that then you can use for your edit. One downside with this is that you can't record with using an external monitor. So when you have an external monitor plugged in and you hit record in this photo mode, all of a sudden your external monitor goes black, but you can preview it before you do hit record. Just something I was kind of playing around with if you're trying to squeeze a little bit of extra resolution out of your image. And like I said, coming in the future, there is going to be a 5.2K raw output, so you can record on your Atomos Ninja V, be able to get a raw image. And that's something I'm looking forward to testing once that's available. So I guess I should mention photography. If you guys don't already know, I'm mainly a video guy, and like I'll take photos here and there as well. But with this camera, I have taken it out to do some photo shoots. Here's one of my daughter on the beach with a Sigma 85mm 1.4, and the photos are beautiful. Now, I wasn't able to process the raw photos yet. However, just using the fine JPEGs, I was able to get some pretty good looking shots. And I apologize if I'm not covering a whole lot when it comes to the photo side of this camera, but from my experience, the photos look great. But my main focus is definitely video. We need to talk about the crop on this camera, because that's been one of my biggest frustrations when working with the Panasonic S5. So when you're in full frame mode, you can only record 4K at 24 or 30 frames a second. As soon as you go to 60 frames a second, you have to shoot in APS-C mode. So for me, when I'm going back and forth between 30 and 60, it gets frustrating because there's a lot of times where I want to shoot 60, but I want to have the full width of the full frame mode because I don't want to have to be switching lenses. If I'm shooting on primes and I'm shooting on a 35mm prime, which is what I'm shooting right now, and I want to get some slow-mo shots, all of a sudden that 35mm is going to have a 1.5 crop on it. So it's going to change how I have to shoot, and it's not going to be an easy thing to switch back and forth between slow-mo and real-time footage. And then when it comes to the slow motion, you can shoot at 120 frames per second, you get the full sensor readout, you get autofocus, but then if you want to go to 180, again, it crops into that APS-C mode. So what I was thinking is there's an easy solution to this. Use APS-C lenses. And then if you use APS-C lenses, you can go on any resolution at any frame rate that's available in this camera, and you never have to worry about the crop in and out. So I actually went out and bought the 3 Sigma APS-C lenses that are for the L mount, which is, you know, there's not a ton of lenses for the L mount right now, but these 3 were a good option because you get a 16, you get a 30, and you get a 56, which is essentially a 24, a 50, and an 85. So it's a good little 3 lens lineup, one for wide vlog style, and then you have the 50 and the 85, which are good for getting B-roll shots. Now, when I've been testing this, I found that it works great when you want to swap between, say, 24, 30, and 60. You don't really have to worry about that crop going in and out. And also, the lenses themselves are much smaller. So in a run and gun style shoot, when you have a backpack and you're kind of out in wild, one of the things I really like about Micro Four Thirds, which is why I've been such a big fan of the GH5 for so long, is its smaller gear. So with APS-C lenses, smaller gear, so you don't have to carry as much. Right now I'm shooting on the Sigma 35mm, and this lens is massive compared to, say, the Sigma 16mm, which is a much smaller lens, so you can carry less weight. You know, it obviously depends on what kind of shooter you are, whether carrying around full frame lenses with all of their size and weight does make a big difference. For me, if I'm out like exploring the slot canyon like I did in this last video I shot yesterday, I would rather have smaller lenses. Now there's one big hiccup though. I found that when you use APS-C lenses on this camera, you can't shoot in 120 or 180. The options just don't exist, they're grayed out. Now this is something I brought up with the Panasonic engineers because I've been able to chat with them about this camera, and they know that that's an issue, and it might be something that will be fixed in the future. I don't have a for sure confirmation on that, but I really hope that they do fix this. So should you get this camera? I think it really comes down to what type of shooter you are and what you need from a system. Do you want a full frame camera? And if you do, what kind of features do you need to be able to make your workflow easier, to be able to make videos and tell stories better? If you're someone who already is a Panasonic user and you've wanted to dive into full frame, you're gonna really like this camera because it's going to feel a lot like your GH5 or your GH5S, but with a lot more features, and just it's easier to use when you're creating content. Also, the autofocus is faster than those cameras, so you will be able to use your autofocus more often. The things that are most frustrating with this camera for me are the lack of choices when it comes to lenses, the crop in and out when you're using 4K 60, and then of course the autofocus. Beyond that, I think this camera is amazing, and I'm really excited to see what Panasonic's gonna do with the GH6. And I've been a GH5 and GH5S user, GH4 user for a super long time, so I really do enjoy working with Micro Four Thirds, but it is a treat to be able to have a full frame sensor as well. All right, guys, if you wanna see some videos that I've shot exclusively using the S5, I'll put them right here on the screen. Check those out, take a look, see what you think of what I was able to shoot using this camera. All right, guys, I'll see you over there.